she took out some bundles of money and gave him. "I know you want this. So get it to help your miserable life." Simon wasn't pleased with her insult because of the money she wanted to give him. But he knew at the end of it must comes a condition. So before she could request for it, he asked her first. The woman laughed and praised him for his unique insight. She told him how she has been seeing him whenever she drives past the house, and she decided to help him buy. Living a luxury life has been one of the best for Ellie, a wealthy Black African woman who lives in America. She has everything in her abode without stress. But with her wealth she was not a free giver. She lacks emotions and sympathy to outsiders, except to her son, Michael. She loves him and buys quality materialistic things for him. But Michael, a young kid, could be seen as opposite his mother. One day, when his mother was bringing him back from school, she parked in front of a supermarket to receive a call. A shabby-looking young boy came and knocked the car screen. When Michael saw him, he was elated in joy. He opened the car door and greeted him like a closed friend they were. Ellie's eyes opened in shocked, couldn't believe her eyes. She ended the call in anger and alighted from the car to talk sense to her son. "Michael, why talking to a dirty pig like him?" She scolded him, leaving Michael's friend speechlessly. When they arrived home, she couldn't keep shut to what her son did. Not only did he talk to a poor boy, but he looks dirty and stinky. "Mother, he is a very good boy. He is an orphan." Michael tried to calm his mother, but she was way too upset to listen to Michael. "Don't ever in your life talk to a low-life person like that again in your life, Michael," she said to him, and entered her room in annoyance. Michael wasn't happy to what his mother did, and he broke down sadly, crying on behalf of his friend, Simon. He doesn't understand why his mother detested the poor, why she refused allowing him to be friends with whomever he likes. He was heartbroken and really felt sad for everything. The next day, Ellie organized a get-together party in her house. It was mainly for the rich gangs. There was surplus food and drinks, money was spraying up around them. Michael sat on a single couch watching all of this. His mother was extremely happy, enjoying the moment of her life. He then thought of something and quickly gets down from the couch and hurried to the servers. He requested for a package food and he was given. He went to his room and packed some juice and then headed out of the house. He walked some miles down looking around for something until he spotted Simon under a shed sleeping. He ran over to him happily with the hefty package he was carrying. When Simon woke up and saw him, he was flabbergasted and takes a glance around. "Don't worry, my mother isn't coming," Michael told him and then gave him the food. Simon's face brightened up joyfully. His stomach grumbles excitedly at the sight of the food. "Thank you very much. I have been starving for days," he said to Michael, who sat in front of him smiling. "Eat up quickly in order not to starve more." Michael uttered in joy and began narrating the joyful moment ongoing in his house. Simon listened while eating and then he stopped eating halfway. He stares at Michael while looking behind him. It got Michael's attention. And he also looked back, and to his surprise, he saw his mother's car at other lane as she watches them with displeased. "I am sorry," Simon uttered to Michael sadly. Michael stood up and smiled at him, not to blame himself for what he did. He waved at him and ran over to meet his mother in the car. Ellie drove off silently with unpleasant thought against Simon in her heart. She was thinking of what to do to separate her son from him because she sees that Michael's friendship with him has really gone deep. Unknown to her, Simon also ran after her car, in order to know where they live. By the time he got there, he was out of breath. He was glad Ellie didn't speed from making him missed the way. He was glad that their house isn't that far to where he was. He then hid somewhere beside the gate, peeping out to watch them. He saw Ellie pulling Michael's ear along into the house. At that point, he was devastated, sad and blaming himself for what is happening to Michael. He sat there and thought of what to do to help his friend. He knew he didn't deserve the torture he was receiving. What can I do? He asked himself while brooding. Just then 2 strangers came out from Michael's house, whispering to one another. He was scared and had to sit a bit distance from being noticed. The 2 persons walked almost over to where he was sitting while talking. He wanted to run but something kept him glued on a spot. Why are they outside alone suspiciously? He said in his mind curiously, paying attention to their moves. The 2 strangers shushed him after sighting him, covering their nose in disgust at him. But still he remains there, pretending not to care about their presence. They both continued talking and by then speaking out. The man was telling the woman not worry about Ellie, that he had already figured out what to do. The woman laughed slightly, gave him a subtly wink of approach which flustered the man. She told him to be fast about it, that her impatient is calling out for her. The man gave her an assurance that before the end of the year he would be a widower. They both laughed about it and Simon shook in disbelief, trying to comprehend their conversation. How they are related to Ellie and Simon. Why they are plotting evil against her. He sat there looking lost, but seriously paying attention to their conversation. They definitely thought he was nobody to Ellie's family for them to be open-minded outside beside him. Oh poor thing, do you mind having this half pizza of mine? I know you must be starving. Oh poor thing. The lady threw the pizza at Simon mockingly, looks at him irritatedly and returned back to the house along with the man. Simon watches them going inside looking troubled, thinking from left to right on what to do. How he could tell Ellie of what he heard. He sat there until evening, he saw when the visitors were leaving, and later on he slept on the cold floor shivering with the joy of seeing another day. In the morning, Michael sat up on his bed not happy. It was holiday season and he was sad that he doesn't have another means of going out to meet Simon since his mother has grounded him because of what he did previous day. He was restless, thinking of Simon all alone. He stepped down from his bed and stood in front of his wardrobe gazing at all the clothes he has. He look around his beautiful room and imagine how Simon daily life outside the house. In the scorching sun and raining season, not even the winter period they are. While in his thinking cap, his door opened and a tall-looking fragile man entered blushing effortlessly at him. He turns back at him and returned to his bed. The man tried having a conversation with him but Michael wasn't interested. When will you give me chance to have a nice time with you as a father, the man said to him, and he retorted angrily back that he wasn't his father, therefore he doesn't want him. Why? I have been a good man to your mother ever since we got married 5 months ago. Michael refused listening to him and covered his ear with his sleeping pillow. The man grinned and had no choice than to leave. When he did, Michael went to lock his door. Annoyingly, walked to the window stand and dragged the curtain aside to look outside. The sky seems brightened for a better day for him. He wishes to have a pleasant day and a miracle to happen. He smiled broadly looking around until his eyes fell on a figure sleeping outside the gate, cuddling on a spot with his tattered hair. Simon, he almost shouted loudly in joy. He jumped excitedly, waving his hand outside to call his attention, but Simon couldn't even get any glimpse of it. He bumped his head simultaneously, thinking fast on what to do. Out of excitement he took one of his shoes and stood in position by the window to throw it out. He threw the first, second, third and the last he threw, hit Simon's feet that he got up immediately. Who is that? Simon look around fearfully until he turns back and look at the building. He saw Michael waving speedily in joy at him. And immediately, he waved back as well, jumping happily. How to meet each other became a bridge between them. They could only wave to one another until Michael's attention got taken by his mother. She yelled at him for not obeying her husband. I married him mostly because of you. Why should you keep on rejecting and disobeying him?" she said in an audibly voice that frightens Michael. "George has been a very good and loving husband to me and also to you, but you failed to see it all. What else do you want him to do for you? What exactly do you want again, Michael?" she was saying out loud that Simon could hear from where he was. He could only stare at the window, hearing those disturbing voice of Michael's mother. When it was night, he returned from the street. He had gone to beg for something to eat and sat on the same spot at Michael's gate. He doesn't know what he was up to or how he must be fearing. He couldn't refrain from checking the window occasionally. Shortly, someone whistles from a car to call his attention and he ran there immediately, hoping for a miracle. But his expectation was desolated when he saw the exact woman that attended Ellie party, and same person that threw pizza at him. His smile faded just by looking at her. "Hey dirty boy," she squelched amongst discomfort. "Hi," he answered with his face down. She then asked what he was doing there and why he was homeless. But none of this could Simon answered. "I will help you out of your stinky life," she uttered shabbily, scanning him from head to toe. "You should be grateful, you know," she said to him again whilst expecting him to be happy. When she noticed his nonchalant attitude, she took out some bundles of money and gave him. "I know you want this. So get it to help your miserable life." Simon wasn't pleased with her insult because of the money she wanted to give him. But he knew at the end of it must comes a condition. So before she could request for it, he asked her first. The woman laughed and praised him for his unique insight. She told him how she has been seeing him whenever she drives past the house and she decided to help him by getting something in return. Simon asked what it was and she brought out a package and ordered him to go deliver it to anyone in Ellie's house. He wasn't surprised because of the conversation she heard her having with a man, which might be included to what she brought. He collected it and she also gave him the money. She sat in her car and watched him going to delivered it. He pressed the house bell and a minute later the gate was opened. Ellie was shocked to see him, but he stretched the package to her immediately, which shut her up. "Who owns this?" she asked in quick expectation response. "Miss Susan asked me to bring it. But I will advise not to eat it," he stuttered while answering. Ellie doesn't know the person and also wasn't expecting anyone's order. Just then the man showed up behind her and Simon's mouth was agape. The man collected the package from Ellie and asked her to follow him, that it was a food he ordered for. They left Simon dumbfounded to what the food could be. "Is it poisoned?" he asked himself confusingly in contemplation. Perambulating in front of the gate, Ellie believed George and she carried the food on the dining to dish for everyone. But George said he was not hungry, that he ate too much in the afternoon. Ellie smiled and pecked him for loving her food. She buys to his lies of ordering the food because he felt she was too tired to cook that evening. Ellie called Michael to the dining and served his food. She also took her portion and reserved the rest for the next day. George was sitting happily, stealing an eye at them when pressing his phone. He couldn't wait to inherit all of her properties and get settled with the love of his life when she and her son eventually dies of the poisoned food. Michael stood up before eating and said he wanted to ease himself. He wasn't hungry and only wanted to find a way to give the food to Simon. So he was unable to carry the food. When he was able to go out, he ran outside the gate and there he saw Simon sitting down in thought. He tapped him back to reality and both friends hugged each other happily. "Don't eat the food. Do not eat it." Michael stood surprisingly, wondering how he knows about the food they were eating. He asked why, and then as fast as Simon could narrate, he told him what just happened. "Wait, my mother just ate the food." Michael screamed in disbelief. Michael ran back into the house worriedly and saw his mother sitting beside George. He pushed him aside and was rubbing her face all around. "What is the problem, son?" Ellie asked. Oh no, you should go to the hospital right now, mother. And why? For what? Ellie asked, squeezing her face. Michael was confused, not knowing how to spill the truth out. He doesn't want to endanger Simon, and he has to save his mother too. Why is he adamant about her going to the hospital? George think in his mind, looking at them. To Ellie's surprised, she started having pains under her abdomen. It was getting severe that she couldn't handle it. She screamed and held onto her son. Michael heart races in thousand, looking perplexed and expected less of George by what he was told. George walked around the house, taking time in delaying by carrying her to the hospital. Michael ran to where they kept the telephone and it wasn't there. He ran upstairs to check the other one and it wasn't there likewise. Ellie's strength was gone and her eyes went blurry. Mr. George, please save my mother. Please help her. Michael cried, unable to lift Ellie. By the time Ellie couldn't breathe again, George carried her into the car and drove down to the hospital. When Simon saw how he drove out, he definitely knew something has happened. He knelt down and prayed silently on behalf of Ellie. When they arrived at the hospital, Ellie was taken in urgently and was checked on. Michael stood far away from George, bowling in anger at him. She blamed her mother for trusting and loving him. He blamed her for not believing him once concerning him. He didn't know how he was able to get control of his mother feelings and other things about her. He made a promise right there to expose him if anything should happen to his mother. Moment later, the doctor came out and told George Ellie have recovered, but she needed some space and time before seeing anyone. George was shocked. He wasn't expecting her recovery. He smiled pretentiously, thanking the doctor. Your mother is fine. She is back to life. Is that not a miracle? He said to anxious Michael. Michael didn't answer as he only wanted to see his mother in order to believe him. He went to meet one of the nurses and asked to see his mother, but he was declined. It took hours before they finally had the chance to see Ellie. Just like a dream to George, he was surprised that Ellie was able to survive it. Yet, he promised not to give up on his plans. Ellie confronted him and he denied knowing anything about the poisoned food. Even with the fact that there was report about it from the hospital, he still clears himself from knowing nothing about it. Michael allowed his mother vent all out until he calls her privately in his room and then told her everything Simon said. Ellie was muted for some minutes before responding. She told her son she would like to hear it from Simon himself. By the time Michael went out to call Simon, he wasn't there. He looked around, hoping to see him, and he was nowhere to be found. He hurried inside and told Ellie. Then she said they should wait until he returns. Day after days, Simon was nowhere to be found. Michael wasn't happy and was scared of his friend. He could only suspect one person, and it was his stepfather, George. Ellie accused Simon wrongly for being responsible to what happened to her. She swears to get him arrested whenever she sees him. But Michael was against it, telling her Simon must have been in danger. Ellie refused listening to Michael and bent on getting Simon arrested. Michael followed Ellie to a party, and on their way coming, many homeless children came running to her for provision. She shushed them away arrogantly, holding her son backward from getting touched by them. They are human, Michael uttered tearfully to her. Will you get going before I reset your brain with a slap? She responded audibly, pushing Michael forward. Out of nowhere a gunshot was fired and Ellie stopped, then falls down. Immediately, Michael's eyes opened in awe and ran to Ellie on the ground. He started crying out for help, but nobody came out to him. He held her body with his hands soaked in blood. Mother, 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 he called, crying soberly. Who shot her was nowhere to be seen. He wept bitterly by her lifeless body until an ambulance came by to carry her to the hospital. She was pronounced dead on arrival there. And everything became horrible to Michael. He bent on his knees halfway and whimpered. He doesn't want his mother gone. Everything suddenly became empty to him. How can he? Lost his friend and then his mother. His heart was broken, shattered like a broken pot. George later came around looking panic, going from pillar to post. In his mind he was extremely happy to what happened. He couldn't wait to get her buried and moved on with his life by acquiring everything she had. That same day Ellie was taken to the morgue for preparation of her burial. Michael locked himself in his room for days without eating, and George also didn't care. He didn't informed Ellie family of her death and only cares about burying her. Many days later, George finally carried Ellie's body to the cemetery by gathering of her friends and workers, including his colleagues. It was a saddened day for Michael. They finally laid her to rest and her grave was decorated with bouquet of flowers by almost everyone. George returned home with Michael and right from there everything changed between them. He got scolded and slapped by George for all the past behavior he had shown to him. You better behave yourself in this house or else you will end up living a life like that stinky boy that stays in front of the gate, George said, almost spatting on him. Michael bursted into tears, feeling lonely and sad. His vision and goals in life became nothing right in his eyes. He knew his life will be miserable living with a man that only came into their lives to wreck his mother. When Michael thought he had seen it all, George changed his school to another one. He also asked him to evacuate his room and start living in the guest room. The lady he seems Simon told him about started coming all the time. He was pained seeing her because she was her mother's best friend. Someone she knew her mother cherish a lot. He was always lonely without care and love. The lady whose name is Brenda also came as a demon to torment him in his mother's house, treating him like a nobody, asking him to do what he hasn't done in his life. He sat all alone thinking if he should end his life to go meet his mother in heaven because of the hardship.